everybody, and welcome to another amazing video of DIY investing. We are now officially moments away from true price discovery on the altcoin level. Bitcoin has already entered price discovery, Ethereum is only a few $100s away from making a new all-time high, and the total market cap of the altcoin charts is showing the exact same thing. This is the moment that we've been positioned, preparing, and awaiting for the new all-time high move, because I'm telling you guys, I've been in crypto for 10 years. I've made a bunch of money in these markets, and this is the biggest cycle that we're ever going to have. So today, I'm going to break down some of the most important charts that you need to be paying attention to so that we can go about making the most profit over the next few months. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you find any value in this video, please do me a favor, hit that like, comment, and subscribe button. Without further ado, let's jump right into this amazing video today. Alrighty everybody, here we are jumping into today's video, and as you guys can see, we're going to be starting out with Ethereum. I think it's an important altcoin update video because everything that we're needing to see for the altcoins to truly have Altseason is playing out, and we're really just a few $100s away from Ethereum confirming all of this. Now right off the bat guys, you know that what I was comparing this exact cycle to has always been the last cycle for Bitcoin, which was 2020. We knew that Ethereum was just following the same COVID capitulation, and it was going to end up V-bottoming into a new all-time high. And so far, that's exactly what's happened. Now, the important thing I need you guys to pay attention for is the fact that we've got both of our big breakouts. We had our breakout of the downtrending resistance. We confirmed that flip and retest right here at about 3,500. And now we're getting further continuation from that. So we've broken out of all downtrending resistance. We've confirmed every sort of significant move and higher high that we needed to confirm the true breakout into new all-time highs. The only thing that we're really waiting for now is just the all-time high breakout itself. And if we come over here, we can see that we're pretty much just tagging that same level for the first time this cycle. We're at a very important time for altcoins because anytime Ethereum breaks out and enters price discovery, this is where you see that big rotation take place into the altcoins. We've already seen Bitcoin rallying, we've already seen it make a new all-time high, but now that we're finally at the point where ETH is following suit, ready to make price discovery as well, this is the point where all of those high cap cryptos and any sort of on-chain altcoins on the Ethereum chain, that's where they're going to start benefiting. But we have kind of a rule of thumb here when you're watching the altcoins move, and when Altseason starts, basically you have a trickle-down effect where you'll have the high cap cryptos led by Ethereum. They will run first. All of those top 10 cryptos, maybe even in the top 50, those higher market cap projects, they're going to all start running pretty hard together. And once those start to kind of finish out their first big breakouts and they start to run into price discovery, then it starts to trickle down to the mid caps, and the mid caps will run. And once the mid caps run and they start to look like they're about done, then that money trickles down to the low caps, and so on and so forth. Usually the end of the rallies, you see NFTs start to blow up. So that's kind of what we're going to be watching for, right? We've already seen ETH breaking out. Once ETH goes into this next move, you know, we've got a couple targets that we're watching for. If you watched my last video, we were talking about our fib targets. Now, where Bitcoin peaked in its last cycle, with ETH following the same fractal, we would be looking at least the 2618 for Ethereum on this next run. And in fact, where Bitcoin ended up peaking was in between the 3618 and up here in the 2618. It was about right about this period here. So if Bitcoin and ETH are to follow the same sort of relationship, if ETH is going to kind of follow what Bitcoin did with that last bull market, which up to this point it already has perfectly, we're looking at, over the next few months, ETH rounding all the way up here to about a $13,500 Ethereum. And in my opinion, we could very easily see the potential where ETH runs all the way up here around $18,000 to $20,000. Those are my targets. I think anywhere from about $13,000 to $18,000, that's a really fair value for where we can target for locking up our profit on ETH. But if you guys notice, we still have a long ways to go until that move takes place. And so, you know, in the short term, we can see ETH run all the way up to maybe this 1618 region, which is going to be about $8,500 approximately. If we're to see ETH make a big breakout, don't be surprised if a little pullback comes back in. You know, we see that 20%, 30% dip before we get, you know, kind of that next big move to finish out the cycle. This is more along the things that I'm watching for because we've already extended so late into the end of this year. You know, we're already just a few months away until the very ending of this cycle. And so the idea that ETH is going to kind of break up out here, it's going to go sideways, and it's going to kind of follow more of the same events that has happened up to this point, I don't find that likely. I do think that the way the blow off top is going to stack up is going to be very more similar to more or less what the last cycle did, where once we started breaking out, it kind of just finished that euphoric blow off top all in one go. Now, even though we ended up making one more new all-time high right here, the real peak of the mania took place just in that first major breakout, where we can kind of see this parabolic trend form. Now, if we're looking at this playing out in a similar way, I do believe that all of the long-term consolidation, the choppy sideways back and forth, that's all completed. You know, we're not going to have more of this type of price action. That was all being done below the all-time highs. Now that the new liftoff is happening, we're starting to break out, we're starting to run into new all-time highs, I do think that the next portion of the cycle is going to happen in a really quick period of time, where ETH is going to really start ballooning in a big way. You know, any correction will probably be really short-lived, and it'll just be a really short opportunity to get in for those that actually want to buy back in. And we're going to see this thing really start to outprice the majority of people. You know, we only have a few months until the end of the year, so where we're at right now, if we pull up a date tool, you know, if we get towards the end of the year, the very end of the year is basically only 150 days away. And the amount of time that it took ETH to run into its first big run of all-time highs in the last cycle, let's just say, you know, let's look at the all-time high over in here. The all-time high, really where we started to run was about December of 2020. So if we just draw a time frame tool, you know, that was about 133 days the ETH really started to explode into new all-time highs. And, you know, if we're looking at approximately the same time frames this time around, we're looking at about 150 days from right now until the end of the year. So, you know, we've seen this type of price action before, where the market can get really quickly balloon out of proportion that just seems really, you know, crazy for most people. The market caps start blowing up, everything's going crazy, all the on-chain alts are blowing up, giving us unique opportunities to trade on-chain. And all of that is a really short period of time that takes place. So, you know, watching ETH go from 660 bucks all the way up here to about, you know, 4,500 in one big go of about 130 days, you know, we can't be surprised to see the same thing happen again once more with ETH. We only have 150 days until the end of the year. So, in my opinion, we're going to see ETH really start to pick up in a big way, and the rest of this year is just going to be markup. We're going to see ETH extend, and even though I think it is possible that ETH could run, you know, altcoins as a whole could peak sometime at the beginning of 2026, you know, I still don't believe that this is a significantly lengthening cycle where we're just going to see all of this new money come flooding into the market, and, you know, the altcoins are going to run throughout all of 2026, and you look at the stock market charts and how they just have gone up for basically 25 years. I don't think that's happening with crypto, and there's going to be a lot of people that are kind of on that belief system where it's like, man, you know, everything's breaking out, the institutions are here, they're just never going to sell, and these things are always going to go up. And I think there's going to be a lot of people that kind of lean into that belief, only for that belief to fail once ETH really starts to rally up to these higher resistance levels, because that's where we're going to be looking at a top. If I had to guess, you know, sometime at the end of this year, we're going to see ETH peaking, which this is drawn a little bit further out. If we were to really see what's going to take place, the end of the year is literally like right here. So ETH would just pretty much balloon like this to finish out the cycle. It would be a very, very short, quick impulse. So is that the likely scenario, or is it more likely that maybe ETH ends up running up here, we get this little pullback, but then we really end up peaking sometime February or March of 2026? That's the latest I would ever anticipate any of the altcoins running into 2026. I just don't see a scenario in which we run all the way deep into 2026, maybe at the end of 2026. I know a lot of people are talking about that because of the institutional involvement, but we've never seen anything like that happen, and I'm not really the one to believe that it's going to, you know, this late into a cycle. We've perfectly followed the 4-year cycle. We've followed the same time frames. We're in the very ending of this year, which has historically been when the altcoins run the hardest. So the best thing that we can do is target the end of the year. You know, if we're sitting at Ethereum rallying all the way up here over $10,000 and we're at the end of the year, in my opinion, I'm going to be selling. You know, I don't really care so much if we extend a couple months later and I miss out on some of that profit. You know, if you were following this channel, we've been accumulating since all the way back down in here. I mean, I was accumulating back in 2016 and 2017, but really the max amount of my accumulation took place at the bottom of the last cycle. I accumulated a whole bunch of stuff over in here. So the idea of me selling at 10K, even if we run all the way up to 20,000, it's not that big of a deal because of the fact I've already captured so much profit. And I think that that's another thing that most people should focus on as well, is if this is your first cycle, and even though you haven't accumulated back down in here, don't be sad about the idea of you taking profits at a $10,000 Ethereum. Even if you didn't make as much profit as you possibly could, I still think that this cycle is going to get so overextended in the short term that once you start selling at 10K, the buy opportunities that are going to happen in the bear market are going to far outweigh any of that lost profit that you missed out on that cycle top, because nobody sells the exact top, nobody buys the exact bottom. But if you're getting out relatively high and relatively low, getting in at that low point of the cycle, selling out, some point in mania, you're always going to be better off than the person that doesn't. And looking at ETH, getting ready for this next big euphoric pump, this is really where we want to be focusing in on selling, because we know the end of the cycle is here. This is the last chance we have to really capitalize and maximize the fullness of our portfolios. Now, the next thing I wanted to cover is going to be the altcoins. We're going to look at the total market cap 2, and we're going to look at the total market cap 3. Both of these are in equally as important times, and they pretty much look the same, so we don't need to get into a ton of analysis. But more or less what we're looking at here, guys, is the all-time high breakout once more. Keep in mind that this is the total too, so this is excluding Bitcoin. This is basically just the total altcoin market cap chart. So if we're looking at the total altcoin market cap chart, just tagging this prior all-time high, and really we've tagged it a couple times. We just recently, before our correction, this is where we ended up peaking at the beginning or the ending of 2024. So us retesting this level once again, in my opinion, this is just moments away before it finally breaks out and we see more of an extended impulse into new all-time highs. If I had to guess where this is going to go into the short term, I'm not going to be surprised to see this somewhere at about a 3 to a 3.5 trillion market cap before we see any sort of meaningful pullback, right? These little pullbacks along the way are to be expected, but seeing something like this as we keep going up, we shouldn't really expect to see a ton of these big pullbacks, because in my opinion, guys, the whole point I've been trying to make here, these were the pullbacks, right? These are the pullbacks. We make a higher high, we correct back down, make a higher low, right back onto trending support, pretty much just do the same things over and over and over again, but we're always maintaining higher highs, right? Now, coming over here, this is going to be the breakout of the prior all-time high, the all-time high of our last cycle, the big cycle, right? So for us to be breaking out of this, do I find it likely that we're going to see a lot of pullbacks along the way? I really don't. I honestly think that all of the pullbacks and the slow, choppy action was being done below the all-time highs. Once you enter price discovery, this is really where the liftoff happens, and it starts to get really extended. So you shouldn't be targeting the pullbacks once we've made a new all-time high. You should just be looking to sell and then, taking all of your profit into cash. That's all we're doing right now. We're not looking to take our cash and reinvest it back into the market as we're already so late into the cycle. That's a guaranteed way you're going to lose all of the profit that you generate. You can be as early as you want. You can buy the exact low of the cycle. But if you take profits and then look to take those profits and buy back in when we're so close to the ending of that cycle, that's just a recipe for disaster. And chances are you're just going to end up buying the top. You're not going to end up cutting your losses, and you're going to watch as all of that profit dwindles back down to more or less where you started. And at the end of this bear market, probably back down lower than where you started, because it's going to be that bad. All of the accumulation, that should have already been done. This is the moment where we're literally just looking to hold our positions and actually exit out of them. Once we start to see this market cap really start ballooning and going into price discovery in relatively similar ways that it did in the last cycle, right? Obviously it can look a little bit different, but this is what euphoria looks like. And it doesn't matter which chart we're looking at. Bitcoin is the same, altcoins are the same, whether it's Ethereum, whether it's something else, they all follow the same sort of trends. So now that we're seeing not only the total market cap, but the total 3, which is excluding Ethereum even, this one is also right there at the all-time high. In fact, this one actually made an even better breakout attempt than the last one did. The altcoin total market cap chart actually lagged the total 3 when we peaked here in December. This thing rallied all the way up and actually technically made a new all-time high. Just barely. It's not a true breakout or anything. But this thing has been coiling below these all-time highs. It's just been building the support floor, this ascending support, and now that this is, pretty much just a few percentage points away from making that new all-time high, you're going to see this thing really start to balloon like this. And it's going to get really overextended. And you guys can't be surprised when that happens, because we've got some really crazy targets to be looking at. Based off of our Fibonacci, if we're going from the low of the cycle back down to the bottom of this bear market, our minimum target's pretty much the 1618, which is 2 trillion. I think that we pretty much go to that in the first move. But, you know, big picture, we're probably looking more along the lines, and keep in mind that this is the total market cap chart. So oftentimes the market cap charts are actually going to go far overextended above the fib targets. But, you know, if we're looking at where Bitcoin peaked in the last cycle, in between the 2618 and the 3618, if we're to see the altcoin total market cap kind of follow something similar, we're looking at about a 3.18 trillion to a 4.28 trillion dollar market cap. There is still a lot of upside potential to come before we're ever at that point of shifting, where we're looking to be taking our profits out. You know, we haven't really made that new all-time high yet, so I'm not as focused in on that. But you guys know, my target for taking profits has been the end of the year. Been talking about that since 3 years ago. You know, we've been sticking to the same analysis. And so even though at the beginning of this video, I did lay out the potential where maybe the altcoins run in top maybe February or March of 2026. You know, the one thing that we need to be aware of with the 4-year cycles is the one thing that you can't really count on staying the same is actually where the cycle tops are. The cycle tops do actually change, and they can have a variance. The one thing that shouldn't ever change, and the one thing that stays the same when you're calculating timeframes, is the bear market low to the bear market low. The peak of each bear market low should be 4 years from the last. And that's actually the way you trade a 4-year cycle. So when I talk about the idea that maybe we peak a little bit, a couple months into 2026 rather than at the exact end of the year like prior cycles, that's still something that follows the normal 4-year trend. It's just that, you know, the peaks themselves can have a little bit of a variance. So when we're getting at the end of this year, I'm still looking to take profits at the end of the year. If we're looking at all of these markets sitting here and, you know, ETH is up here around this 2618, to me, the 2618 is really kind of that golden level for profit taking with ETH. Once we see ETH rocketing up here to the 2618, in my eyes, anywhere from $13,000 plus is a prime opportunity to lock up your profits with Ethereum. That's where I'm going to be looking at the shifting point of the market cycle top taking place. You know, whatever the time frames of that are, I do find it likely that it's at the end of the year. So whether it's, you know, December of the end of the year, or whether it's January of the end of the year, or maybe if in February of the following year, all of that is in the same time frames, and so I don't think that that should be the big focus. The thing that we need to be worried on the most is understanding the end of the year is the cycle top, so we got to be locking up our profits regardless. You know, once the end of the year comes, I'm locking them up. Even if I keep a little bit of a chunk left in my portfolio, just as a potentiality that we run a little bit into 2026, most of my profit is going to be locked up at the end of the year, and I'm going to be looking to target the bear market, and I'm going to be looking at shorting this market all the way back down, because there's going to be a lot of people that lean towards the belief that this is the institutional cycle, it's the super cycle, we're not going to end up having the same cycle top like the other ones, and those are the guys that are going to get left behind. So for me, I've made enough wealth in the crypto markets. When I pull it at the end of this year, I've already got enough that I don't have to be sitting here trying to jump back into the markets. I can look to take small investments and short the market and trade it back down. And, you know, we can be targeting at the end of 2026 for our next bear market low. And then we're going to be buying Bitcoin. We're going to be playing it safe. You know, the days of these altcoin runs and all of this max euphoria and all the crazy stuff, in my opinion, this is the last one. You know, do I think altcoins are dead? Not necessarily, but I think the vast majority of them are dead. And, you know, with the institutions being here, that shows where we're at on the long-term valuation of a cycle. Smart money is before the institutions, right? All the smart money has been accumulating crypto for the last 10 years. Now that the institutions are here and the TradFi world is going to bring it to adoption, in my opinion, all those crazy upswings in price, all that maximum volatility, the big altcoin rotations, that's going to be a thing of the past, and it's really going to come down to the premier top projects. Those are going to be the ones that sustain long-term growth and adoption. And I just think that if you're trying to cash out on a big market cycle, make your most money possible, and head to the exits, this is the one that you want to do it on. So make sure you're taking those profits at the end of this year. I'm going to keep you guys updated, but this is what I think is going to be playing out for the majority of the market. Alt season's finally here, all the things that we've been waiting for, and I'm super excited to have this opportunity to trade it with you guys. So if you did find any value in this video, please do me a favor, hit that like, comment, and subscribe button. If you guys want to see anything on buying, selling, trading, signals being posted in the Discord, links are in the description to go ahead and sign up on my website. Once you're in, you're always in. It's a one-time payment, lifetime access. So even if I move outside of crypto and start investing into other markets, which I plan to do, you're also going to get the signals for those as well. So I'd love to have you a part of that. Links are in the description to sign up on my website. And with that being said, I'll catch you guys in the next one. As always, peace out.